I felt that I learned far more on the track than I ever did in the classroom. And the richest educational experiences were those that paired the two experiences.
On today's Find the Balance Friday edition of the Yacht Coaches Podcast, Dr. Adams and Coach Francis interviewed Dr. Erianne Weight from the University of North Carolina. Dr. Weight talks about her research career, shares her thoughts on the Finding the Balance book project, as well as discusses current issues in the world of student-athlete support. Welcome to today's show. The Odd Coaches Podcast is sponsored by the CKA Save Project. The CKA Save Project is an industry leader in providing student-athlete academic and athletic support. From assessing student-athletes' academic and athletic skills, to measuring and monitoring student-athlete academic progress, to improving student-athlete time management and organizational skills, the CKA Save Project provides wraparound services for student-athletes from middle school through college. For more information, visit us on the web at www.ckasaveproject.org or schedule a free consultation with Dr. Keith Adams by emailing cka@ckasaveproject.org.
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Odd Coaches Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Keith Adams, and my partner is again on assignment. We told you we find the balance, so he is doing a lot of administrative work. But if he was here today, because of the North Carolina connection, he's my Sergeant Slaughter to my Don Kernodle and Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. The icon, the showstopper, the main event, the reason why we're here, Coach Mike Francis, again, is on assignment. But today, my heart is Carolina blue. We have a very special guest, Dr. Erianne Weight from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She is the Associate Professor of Sports Administration. Her research is directed by a vision to increase opportunities for athletic participation and education. She is also the coordinator of Graduate Sport Administrative Program, the co-director of the Center for Research in Intercollegiate Athletics, and after my own heart, she's a former heptathlete at the University of Utah and a former college track and field coach. Wow, this is a lot, and we're excited. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Odd Coaches Podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. It is an honor to be with you today.
All right. So, Dr. Weight, can you talk a little bit to our audience about your own career in terms of student athlete support and your research career? We'd love to hear about it.
Sure. Well, most of my contributions to the field thus far have been through research and building a bridge between athletics and academics. I came to UNC in 2011, and it was at the height of what we hoped, the closure of the UNC scandal. It ended up lasting a lot longer than everyone anticipated. And I was really drawn into the discussions taking place primarily by faculty who talked about academics as one area of campus and athletics as another area of campus. And as a former athlete, I thought that was such an interesting dichotomy because to me, they had always been far more similar than different. What I thought of my education, I felt that I learned far more on the track than I ever did in the classroom. And the richest educational experiences were those that paired the two experiences. A sports psychology class, for instance, where I could learn the science of psychology from a distinguished faculty member and apply it to areas I was struggling with on the track. So I remember walking through a visualization on the floor of a classroom surrounded by athletes from many other sports. And it was a rich pairing of the science of athletics that is so intuitive. And I've really been fighting for that pairing to come together throughout my career.
You mentioned, and again, readers of the Find a Balance book, which we'll talk about in segment 2, and readers of my own research know that I did include information about the UNC academic case within it. And one of the things I found fascinating and would like to get your thoughts on it is one of the reasons why the athletic department didn't get like the death penalty or something, to my knowledge, was the fact that general students benefited from the sham classes, quote unquote, as well as athletes. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because that was one of the things that caused me to do my research was, wow, we have this great opportunity to go to the University of North Carolina or Syracuse or many of the other ones that I spoke of. And the athletes really didn't take advantage of it fully, but nor were they encouraged to. Is there anything you can speak on as somebody who looked into it as well?
Yeah, well, an interesting thing through all of the digging through emails and research that was done on campus through it was a lot of the athletes who chose to take the paper class did so after they went. There was a letter, for instance, from a men's basketball player who was in a computer science class, and he said, I missed the first 2 weeks of class and feel really behind. And I've heard that this is an option where I can take a class and learn and write a paper through it. And so what I found really heartbreaking through it all was really athletes that did want to get an education, but they didn't have time. and and I mentioned that example at the University of Utah. I was able to take a sports psychology class for athletes. I was able to get credit for track and field, and we had an onboarding class for athletes, and none of those options exist at Carolina. So we have a wonderful leadership academy. There's a lifetime fitness program, but no academic credit was given for all of the really academic activities that athletes engage in. And that's far more common on the West Coast, I found through research. At Stanford, you can get credit for weight training, and there are specific programs for athletes that really pair athletics and academics.
Yes, and I'm based out of the state of Maryland, and I'm glad you mentioned it that way because some of the private schools, if you do participate on the teams, that's your PE credit because you're doing all of the physical activity. Where most of the public schools, you still will have to do some type of physical education class or activity. And I just look at that as a missed opportunity. And you spoke about the stakeholders and kind of like the separation between academics and athletics. One of the things we work with students on is the fact that those skills that you learn in athletics really are what workforces are looking for: the teamwork, the ability to problem solve. And you had mentioned you learn more in athletics and academics, and there's so many commonalities with that. Can you speak a little bit more to that in terms of the work you're doing or your own experiences?
Sure. So one of my former grad students did a study about employer perceptions of former athletes, and we found that there was a very strong correlation between athletics who graduate and their salary, life satisfaction, and social support. Employers also equate athletics participation with employees who are competitive, goal-oriented, able to handle pressure, confident, coachable, self-motivated, and great at working with others. So there is a demonstrated pairing between participation in athletics and all of these educational outcomes. We just haven't categorized athletics as education in our society yet. And I think that there are some reasons for that that are troubling. I think some of it is based in racism and assumptions about scholarly merit. Our Black men comprise less than 3% of full-time undergraduate students within our Power 5 conferences. And while they make up the majority of athletes in big-time money sports in football and basketball, but we're asking these athletes to balance 2 full-time jobs. So right now, I think a lot of institutions are valuing bodies and athletic production more than holistic capabilities. And we haven't been able to make that change as we have in other fields. there's painters, violinists, dancers, biologists who all get credit for pursuing what they love, but our athletes do not. And we're putting them in a position that makes it very difficult to find the balance of you, as you've mentioned, because there is just so limited time.
Wow, that is just a perfect segue. So, fans, we are going to take a brief break, and on the other side, come back and talk a little bit about the Find the Balance book project, as well as some possible suggestions and solutions that institutes, primary and secondary, can do to really help this, and especially post secondary. We'll be right back on the iCoaches podcast.
The reviews are in for Dr. Keith Adams' book, Finding the Balance, My Personal Journey to Academic and Athletic Success. College professor and student athlete academic expert Dr. Lisa Rubin said, "There is nothing out there like this book, so I do hope people will pay attention and give it a read." Former George Mason standout Fowler Campbell said, "Consider this book an opportunity to work directly with Dr. Adams just like I did. I assure you that there will be something you can take away that will be useful to you throughout your personal journey." Erianne Weight, a recent college graduate who is a software engineer, said, "I like how the book is based on research, which makes it good for general students as well as student athletes." The book serves as both a memoir to Dr. Adams' 30-year academic and athletic career, as well as an instructional guide to assist student athletes, parents, coaches, teachers, and administrators navigate through the challenges of finding a better balance between academic and athletic success. The book includes over 15 personal stories and anecdotes from Dr. Adams, along with numerous former players and colleagues from a variety of sports and endeavors. You can order your copy at www.ckasaveproject.org. From the main page, simply click CKA Save Project Services and order the Find the Balance book. For more information, contact Dr. Keith Adams by email at cka@ckasaveproject.org.
Welcome back to the Odd Coaches podcast. In segment 2, Dr. Weight has graciously, with her schedule being as it is, gave some time to review the Finding the Balance book project. I am always curious and grateful for feedback. Please let me know your thoughts on the project, and thank you.
Well, thank you for this gift to our community. I was inspired and thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I felt as though the overarching message of the book was the importance of advocates and allies for our young athletes. You spoke several times about Coach Galata. I hope I'm saying that right, and about your social network in school and career. That was the key to your academic motivation, and it really underscored the need for us to be more proactive about facilitating mentorship programs for our athletes, particularly between faculty and students, where there's often such a gaping divide between the worlds, and there isn't that looping, what was it called? The looping relationships that continue. Oftentimes faculty see their students once for one semester and that's it. And I think it's so important for us to be a little bit more proactive in facilitating those relationships.
I appreciate you mentioning the looping aspect, because in athletics and coaching, you're a former student athlete. You spend a abnormally ridiculous amount of time, not only with your coaches, but the assistant coaches, the peers on the team, and oftentimes academically. Again, I'll just use the phrase, I think there's some missed opportunities with that. And we spoke in segment 1 about building a bridge between academics and athletics. Can you share some thoughts on how you think a better bridge can be built between the academic community and the athletic community? Because I do mention in the book that a lot of times it seems to be an adversarial relationship where it shouldn't. So if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Well, I really think it's so rooted in education, and right now there isn't a clear path for coaches' education, and because of that, coaching isn't often viewed as an education, or they're not viewed as educators, even though I think every coach you ask would say that education is primarily what they're doing. But again, it's this, is sport academic? And traditionally, it hasn't been, even though music and dance are almost identical in terms of their academic structure, and they're viewed as legitimate academic paths. So when we think about building that bridge, a lot of it comes down to trying to get sport recognized as the science and art that it truly is. And I think it's important for our coaches to have legitimacy, and that will come through very clear academic pathways. I loved that early on in the book you talked about competing coaches, and that AAU coaches lack formal education oftentimes and training that is required at the high school level. And I think we see this at the collegiate level as well. I All coaches have their undergraduate degree, but it can be in anything. And a lot of coaches do what their coaches did and the coach before them without rooting their practices in sports science, without understanding the sociology and psychology that are so important in their everyday interactions with their athletes. So I think really the root of bridging that divide is recognizing coaches as educators, and providing educational pathways for them to get the legitimacy and respect that profession really deserves and needs. They have that relationship with athletes that really isn't mirrored in any other way. They have control and influence over the mind, body, and spirits of the young athletes that they work with. So
Yes, and that is male and female. I love that you mentioned a need for proactive mentors. Um, can you talk a little bit about uh, you have a unique sense of being a former student athlete, a former coach, and a current researcher. Um, can you speak to any of the either current research or the work you're doing in terms of mentoring student athletes to obtain that college degree?
I haven't done anything specific on mentorship, um, but I can speak to my senses being on faculty athletics committees, and
Oh,
seeing the kind of lack of pairing between the two.
you have been a faculty academic rep.
No, I haven't been an FAR. I've been on faculty athletics committees, so
Okay.
it's kind of the step below the FAR on
Okay.
most campuses. Um, and interestingly, on our own faculty athletics committee, there's faculty that are liaisons to different teams, and they're actually assigned to be the faculty rep for a specific team. And the relationship is interestingly quite awkward. A lot of the coaches view the faculty as, and it could be the campus at UNC because of the tenuous relationship post scandal, but some coaches see the faculty coming as kind of watchdogs, as coming to see, what are they doing wrong or what. And I think faculty feel awkward because we don't understand the coaching world, and we don't want to step on toes or get in the way. And so it's really interesting how these relationships aren't natural, and we we should be able to foster a little bit more communication and collaboration between faculty and coaches, let alone faculty and students.
I'm glad you mentioned that because as a former athletic director, as a former high school coach, as a former college coach, a lot of those times those relationships are not as cultivated just because of time and space. When you work in a school building, you see everybody if you
Mm-hmm.
want to. So as an
Mm-hmm.
AD, you're walking the loop. You're saying hi to the English teacher, the math teacher, the students, the admin. In college, because I was at a small college, probably about 50 acres, I made it a
Mm.
point to meet with the faculty reps during regular recruiting visits to have just a group of staff that I could just go to if a kid was interested in insert sport. And I don't know if it was because we were air quote Division III or the size of the campus, but the more you work with larger universities, the more the disconnect
Mhm.
happens because you're in your own separate world. So, man,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
got to do something
physically,
about that.
absolutely. Just the locations on campuses. There's often athletic complexes far away, and there aren't any natural pairings. And like I said, even in the structured pairings, it's not natural. And that's an issue that speaks to this divide that exists.
Right. So we will break here, take a quick commercial, and in our final segment, we'll talk about some of Dr. Waite's current projects as well as current state of athletics and research on the Odd Coaches podcast.
There is an old business adage that says, what gets measured and monitored gets done. It is also fact that deadlines spur action. That is what the CKA Save Project's academic monitoring service can do for student athletes. Measure and monitor their academic progress to improve their grades. Our academic monitoring services provide ongoing academic support for student athletes for a designated period of time. Our academic success coaches work with student athletes on time management and organizational skills, along with improving their ability to self-advocate. Every few weeks, our academic success coaches meet with student athletes to assess their academic progress as well as provide ongoing academic advising. If needed, student athletes have access to CKA Learning Specialists who provide virtual core subject academic support for student athletes. For more information, visit us on the web at www.ckasaveproject.org or schedule a free virtual consultation with Dr. Keith Adams by email at cka@ckasaveproject.org.
Welcome back to the Odd Coaches podcast, and this has been just one of my favorite Find the Balance Friday episodes with Dr. Weight from the University of North Carolina. And Dr. Weight, can you share your thoughts on the current state of student athlete support? And you can go in any direction you want to. So the floor is yours. How is it going living with COVID now?
Well, what I've seen is we have a lot of tremendous programs to support our student athletes, particularly at the universities that I've worked with, which are primarily Division I. The issue is when these programs are not for credit, they become one more thing for our athletes to do. And those that are usually the most overwhelmed are the ones that don't have the bandwidth to be able to utilize the programs that are in existence. And so what we have is student athlete development programs that say, look at all these wonderful things we have for our athletes. And if they're not taking advantage of them, then, it's their problem. It's their loss. Where, like I said, the students that need it the most are the ones that can't partake in them. So I think fundamentally offering these programs for credit gives the opportunity for students to take it and fill the bucket of both getting credit and getting education that they tremendously need. Something else that spoke to me when I was reading your book that's along these lines is your intentional choice to use academic motivation as a defining characteristic rather than academic success, which is the general term we hear. And I think that understanding that motivation is what we really need to focus on, and success is the inevitable result of fostering that motivation is really important. And it's something that I think from now on, when I listen to academic success program, I think it's very similar. I often say with a lot of our athletics legislation that we're putting band-aids on broken bones. and addressing the symptoms of a problem rather than the problem itself. And I think that that really gets to that. When we talk about fostering academic success, we should really be talking about fostering academic motivation. So thank you for that. I think that's something that I'm always going to think about from now on.
I appreciate that. And fans, the CKA Safe Project defines motivation simply as a desire to act. And as Dr. Waite said, if we can better understand what's going to move you to action, what's going to make you do whatever it is you do, whether it's intrinsic, extrinsic, or heaven forbid, a motivation, which is the Scooby Doo right on row, we can get better success, because I don't know what success is defined for you. C's get degrees. So if that's what's moving you, I'm not going to convince you to want to get an A, but at least I can convince you to meet measurable progress and move forward. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, on the lines of your answer, can you give some advice for student athletes in terms of, let me phrase it this way: they haven't been to school full time in a year or two, so this is the first full time year, partial last year. Now you've got college expectations, academic expectations. You've got the athletic expectations. You also might want to have a social life. That's a lot to deal with. Plus, now your school is on the rumor mill. The Big Ten's making moves. The Pac-12 may not. So there's a lot of noise with that. And you now have the ability to move if you want to do. You can transfer if you want to, and you can make money. But you never took an economics class in high school, and you're signing your rights away for $500 because you're thinking about today.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. So, what would you tell them?
Oh, it is. It is so much, and it's becoming more and more every day with NIL pressure and social media being at your fingertips, and it's just there is so much. So I think my primary advice I'm borrowing from Coach Anson Dorrance, our women's soccer coach here at UNC, and he tells his athletes that you are the general manager of your own construction project. So taking some time, and I don't know if that's on your birthday every year, I don't know if it's your New Year's resolution or every Sunday afternoon, but really thinking about, who do I want to be? Where do I want to go? And thinking about, okay, if that's where I want to go, how am I going to get there? And finding like-minded peers to help you, or finding a mentor to help be your ally, be your advocate. The saying, you become the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. That is something that I really hope every young athlete with aspirations to live the life that they dream of, think about those 5 people that they're surrounding themselves with, and understand that that's what they're going to be, is the average of those 5 people. And so getting people that push you, that motivate you, as you talked about, kind of your Angela in school. Everybody needs a person that's going to keep them accountable, and the most important person needs to be yourself. And so putting some kind of structure for self-evaluation into your weekly schedule is really critical. And if you don't do it, the time's going to go by. So it is just being proactive about knowing your future is up to you. And as a faculty member, I don't think I'm alone in saying that if a student comes up to me at the end of class, introduces themselves, asks a question as you tell them to do, I'm always going to try to help that student reach the goals that they want to. And a lot of times, I think students see faculty as teachers and not practitioners, but a secret that I don't know if many think about is faculty have 20, 30 years of students that are graduates that are working in the industry. And so I think faculty are some of the most well-connected people in the industry because of our student network, and a lot of us are consultants as well. So be proactive about finding those people in your network and really deciding where you want to go.
That was beautiful. And shameless plug on the ACC network, and I've watched it. There is a special about the UNC women's soccer dynasty um, that I think should be mandatory viewing for anybody working in athletics, whether you're a coach or player, because when a small group of people dedicate to a goal, amazing things can happen. And the University of North Carolina women's soccer program is amazing. So you bringing up coach made me think that, because I did watch that special and I was just captivated by the work before the work.
Yes,
Um,
he
one of
he is phenomenal.
one of the things I wanted to get your reaction to is one of the recommendations that I made in my own doctoral research was to have mandatory support classes for second year student athletes. One of the things that I saw was that they do so much for you when you get there.
Hmm.
I mean, they've got your welcome day. They've got your let's find you this day, let's find you that day. And a good friend of the show, Dr. Lisa Rubin, her advice is always to find the helpers as soon as you get on campus. As soon as you get on campus, hey, once you find your dorm, find a helper. Go
Hmm.
immediately to the helper. Uh, and I like the fact that you mentioned for credit, because a lot of the resources are just extra and time management is an issue. But
Yep.
any thoughts to mandatory support classes for second year student athletes, because that sophomore slump is real
Hmm.
and those expectations continue to grow. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that before we transition to your current projects.
Oh, absolutely. I was very struck by the statistic you mentioned in your book that 22% of first year college student athletes do not return for their second year. And having that built in structure for sophomores clearly would address that, and knowing that there is support, that there is this structure, that if you're starting to feel lost, that you have this built in support group for yourself and others that are struggling in the second year. So again, yes, I think it would be wonderful. I think all 4 years there should be programming for credit. A lot of people, I know, I believe it's Oregon State has a leadership minor for
Ooh,
their athletes that is really built in throughout the years, and I really would love to see that happen. And I think it can be for athletes and non-athletes. In fact, we mentioned Anson. Anson and I are teaching a class this year for the first time
wow.
together, just
Can
for
I come down
first
and
year.
watch? That's a
Yes,
shoot.
actually, you'd be amazing to have. It's called the Art and Science of Expertise,
Love it.
and it's going to be for freshmen. And it's initially we thought how wonderful it would be to target athletes, but really the development of expertise in athletics is so similar to what it is in every other domain that people are passionate about. And so, talking about expertise broadly and including students that are doing very similar pursuits. I mentioned music and dance, but also you name it, anything that students are passionate about is very similar to the passion that athletes have. And I think bringing that together, bringing those discussions together, and having these types of classes for athletes and non athletes where you can talk about expertise, deliberate practice, and these similar structures across the spectrum will help to cut down the silos that often exist within athletics.
Yes, and I'm glad you're bringing in the arts, because it is no different than the musician, whether you're a singer, dancer, you play, the time, the hours, the time management, the structure, the instruction.
Hmm.
Same thing with the plays. All of the work happens backstage.
Right.
So I am. I'm so pleased that you did mention extracurriculars in terms of the full gamut of what they do. It's no different than any other component. It's just my avenue happens to be a small ball or a larger ball or a net or a racket or something of that.
Yeah.
So Dr. Wade, can you tell me a little bit about the current projects you're working on? Always love hearing about the current research. I do serve as a content expert, and I have several of my doctoral candidates ready to defend their proposal or to present their research. So please let me know what you're working on.
Nice. Well, I'll just talk about one that I'm excited about that's pretty relevant, and that is it's part of a National Science Foundation grant that we haven't heard back from yet, so I don't know if we have the funding, but we're getting at this idea that I've been circling around of infiltrating education into athletics and demonstrating that we're focusing on football athletes in particular, that they are data scientists and they just don't know it. And so what we hope to do is give them all of the analytics that are being collected and let them play with their data and compare, their stats to others' stats and their progression in injury rehabilitation to an average, and just using all of this data that's so rich in our college sport environment to facilitate data analytics education and really show our athletes that you are scientists, you are dealing with data all day, every day. You just often don't think of yourself in that way.
I am so glad you had mentioned that. One of the things we do as an organization with CKA is we do academic assessments. If you go to a sports camp, they're watching you run, jump, time your 40, weightlifting, whatever. But we assess student athletes we work with on 13 different academic categories. And
Mm-hmm.
we say, here's why you may be struggling with insert subject is because based on data, based on these educational assessments, here's a little gap here. So if you adjust this, then all of these other things can happen. And it's the same thing you're talking about, man. Take the data, analyze the data. That's the scientist in all of us that
Mm-hmm.
we may not know. So that's super exciting. Our super producer Kelly will share your social media information. How can we follow you and just check in on you from time to time? Please, what's the best way to find you on social media?
Well, I am resurging on Twitter. I took a hiatus for a little while, but my handle is at Erianne Weight. And I know that's tricky to spell, but
That's okay. It's on the screen, and our super producer will take care of that.
sounds good. Thank you.
All right. So I appreciate the time you've given us. I appreciate the energy. I appreciate the feedback of the book. Um, this has been just so enlightening. And so fans know, I reached out and I asked, and Dr. Waite gave us time. So that is why it's super extra special that someone who has not had a prior working relationship with us, like many of our previous guests, she said she'd review the book. She did. She said she'd give us some time. She did, and that's the bridge that we're trying to make. So my partner likes to say knowledge should be shared. I think this is just a great episode to continue to share knowledge. And I want to thank you on behalf of my partner for your time.
Of
So,
course.
on behalf of my tag team partner who's on assignment, I am Dr. Keith Adams saying thank you for listening and or watching the Odd Coaches podcast. And we will see you on the sidelines. Till next time, take care.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. The Odd Coaches podcast drops new episodes every Tuesday through Friday on most weeks. Make sure you subscribe to the Odd Coaches podcast on Apple Music, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow the Odd Coaches podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Odd Coaches. Follow Dr. Adams on Twitter and Instagram at CKA Save Project. In addition, follow Coach Mike Francis on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Franchise, spelled Coach Franchize. For more information about the CKA Save Project, please visit them on the web at www.ckasaveproject.org. See you next time on the Odd Coaches Podcast.